Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today to help us observe Native American Heritage Day and celebrate the end of Native American History Month. My name is Michelle Ubaraga, and I serve as the Montana Field Organizer for Moms Clean Air Force. Moms Clean Air Force is a community of more than 1 million moms, dads, and caregivers across the country working to protect our children from air pollution and the climate crisis. I identify as a white woman in my mid-40s with 3 beautiful children, and my pronouns are she, her. I have the pleasure today of introducing 2 incredible guests joining us in celebration of Native American Heritage Day and Native American History Month, Mariah Gladstone and Kenneth Cook. Mariah Gladstone is Blackfeet and Cherokee. She has an undergraduate degree in engineering and is currently completing a master's degree in environmental science. She is owner and host of Kitchen, an online cooking show dedicated to re-indigenizing our diets using digital media. Please visit it at indigikitchen.com. Mariah is an accomplished athlete who teaches at Levitation Nation Aerial Studio in Kalispell, Montana. She is fluent in Indian Sign Language, and she sings professionally with my colleague from Iowa, Corrine Stein, as well as with her father, Jack Gladstone, a musical celebrity here in Montana. Kenneth Cook of the Onondaga Nation is a former kindergarten teacher assistant at Onondaga Nation School in Onondaga Castle, New York. One of his main missions in life is to contribute to the preservation of the Onondaga language through study and instruction. He also works as a freelance contractor who can build anything and everything, and he does so with an exquisite sense for the aesthetics. Kenneth is also a board member at FAST, Blackfeet, which stands for Food Access and Sustainability Team, a group of community leaders, health professionals, educators, and involved citizens within the Blackfeet Nation who are dedicated to identifying food insecurity in the Blackfeet community and addressing it through a variety of approaches, as well as addressing food sovereignty to ensure culturally relevant and affordable food is available for all. Both Mariah and Kenneth live in the Blackfeet Nation in Babb, Montana. In this program today, they address food sovereignty, biodiversity, climate change, and Indigenous rights. I'm so glad that you joined us today. I hope you enjoy the show.
So we like to think about Indigenous food sovereignty using the definition that was created and defined by La Via Campesina, the peasants movement, and then really distributed and promoted by the United Nations. So this is a multi-pillared approach, like legs on a table, where we think about these 4 legs as essential to creating food sovereignty. The first is that our food systems need to be healthy. We want to make sure that the food that we are able to eat in our communities meets our nutritional needs. We want to make sure that our food is affordable. So the poorest people within our community need to be able to afford and access this healthy food. If the poorest people don't have access to it, we don't have food sovereignty. And third, we want to make sure that the food is culturally appropriate, things that we recognize as food. This can be defined in different ways, but that's because it's so dependent on communities. Different communities around the world look at food in different ways and see things as food that other communities may not see. Finally, we want to really focus on the ability of our nations, our localities, our municipalities to regulate their own food and agricultural systems, and the ability to do that using sustainable methods and policy. So for tribal nations, this is especially important as we look at sovereign nations with the ability to write their own laws within their borders and to really regulate, the pesticides that we're allowing to be put on our soil, the ways in which we are regulating monoculture or dysregulating monoculture, whatever that may be, and really, show systems that promote safety, but also sustainability. We're thinking not just to this generation, but we want to make sure that 7 generations in the future, people are also able to have food sovereignty.
Food sovereignty to Indigenous people is part of their identity. You need to take care of your own people. Having that ability to feed your own people is, going to be your groundwork for really claiming sovereignty. Just highlighting the importance of traditional, values really being the core of biodiversity. Constantly I find our, going back to our fundamentals of the 3 sisters, corns, beans, and squash. Not only did they grow in perfect harmony together, there's a large science behind it, producing nitrogen fixing legumes into a soil. So a soil that's been depleted from monocultural planting can only be fixed one way, is through biodiversity. This is the entire background of all of our fundamentals when we teach any children. Just teaching them that not only do things need to work together, that they are made to work together. There's more than just this in life that operates this way. There's many things in the world that operate this way.
Yeah, I think as we look at traditional Indigenous land management principles, we really see the ways in which Native people have maintained this ecological bonsai tree that is Turtle Island. The ways in which we have regulated and manipulated our ecosystems, but in ways that support biodiversity. We recognize that nature hates bare soil, right? And we see so many fields empty of all of their crops after the growing season is done. That's not natural. We recognize that nature hates monocultures. We never see single plants of anything in fields in natural ecosystems. But we also recognize that sometimes things need a little bit of help. And so Native people have planted food forests, have regulated low intensity burns, have demonstrated these different ways in which systems can help to regenerate themselves, whether that be through fires that help seeds germinate, whether that be through intentional planting of different species, different food plants along trails, these different ways that we can use ecological principles to maintain sustainability, increase biodiversity.
Well, in a traditional aspect, for my people, we have 9 clans. I'm born for Beaver Clan. It tends to make us, people from my family think more about larger issues, they say. So instead of thinking, about one type of tree, we're looking at all the trees. So we are brought up with a mindset where we look at the planet as it doesn't need us. It's a large filter. The planet will work itself. It will filter out itself if it's allowed to. Basically, in ecosystems you see that are sprung up from creatures like beavers. This is just a natural lesson you can take from that. The earth does, take care of itself.
All of these things, recognizing, always having living roots in the soil can help sequester carbon, can help make stronger soils. We can use those same principles and really build agricultural systems that not only will help reduce the impacts of climate change, improve our resiliency, and build strong food systems so that everyone is able to eat healthy, affordable, culturally appropriate foods.
I would just say that traditional aspects are really backed up by the science nowadays. That can't be denied from climate change. There is no denying it wasn't just, some people thinking that there's some mystical spirits or something controlling things. Now we have science and evidence backing up our foundations of principles. That's definitely, to me, one of the most important things that's come to light. It comes with a lot of false promises. Comes with a lot of pain. As soon as somebody says that word, it comes with like a sharp pain in your side. Like it's a word term that's thrown around my entire life that's never meant anything to me. All it's meant that is that I have to carry a card to prove who I am, and then it hurts. My right to hunt and fish, you know, has always been squandered on. It's always had issues. I've always been questioned. I've always had a lot of issues with just trying to assert my indigenous rights to my lands, of my people's lands, for hunting and fishing was always complicated. And among all the other promises, you know, that have been not upheld, those were the basic ones. To me, that was our rights, was to be able to hunt and fish and provide for your family and loved ones. That was it. That was our fundamentals, and those were taken away. A lot of those were limited, taken away, and then every excuse in the world was drawn up to withhold those from us.
Indigenous rights is obviously complicated because at the basis of Indigenous rights are these core human rights that we have trouble in a colonized world of accepting what humans have rights to. I think it's further complicated by this knowledge of treaties and what sovereignty means, because as Indigenous people, our identity is defined as our connection to sovereign nations, as this role of citizens that we have within nations that have signed treaties and intergovernmental diplomatic agreements. And so, you know, there is this belief that as Native people, we are treaty people. And we have certain promises that were made through treaties. I think about that in the reverse as well. Non-Native people on this continent are also treaty people, and their rights to be here are also promised through treaties. And so that privilege that comes with our agreements that we have signed has to be thought about in both ways. Native people have rights because non-Native people also have rights. Those were exchanged, and there has to be a balance in order to recognize those agreements that were signed. It has to go both ways, because then the idea of treaties, sovereignty, and rights themselves become meaningless. And I think that's really what Kenneth hit upon, is there is very little knowledge, much less recognition of those rights, those guarantees, those promises. And without that, there is a lot of gut reaction pain that is associated with those terms. Because we work within Indigenous food systems, I always like to remind folks, especially during this time where we're at this weird intersection of Indigenous Peoples Day, especially trying to destroy Columbus Day, and then Halloween, which is fraught with complicated and harmful stereotypes threading into Thanksgiving. And it's like this period of time, which is supposed to be full of harvest celebrations, can often come with a lot of pain and exhaustion for Native people. But it's also Native American Heritage Month, and we do get an opportunity to celebrate the resiliency of Indigenous peoples. And so, as I said, because we work in food and Indigenous foods, I also just like to remind people of the incredible foods that have come from this continent, things that we recognize during harvest meals, things like squash, like the pumpkins that are either gracing your front porch steps or your dinner table, things like sunflowers and beans and corn and tomatoes and potatoes and amaranth and cactuses and maple syrup and berries and so many foods that have originated here because of Indigenous land management, ecological principles, and the ways in which those have been cultivated, so that we can appreciate them and share them over time. Recognizing those foods not only helps us build connections with the land that we are on, but it reminds us of the importance of taking care of those places. We know that when we know where our foods come from, we're more willing to take care of where that comes from as well. For this, that also means taking care of the air, taking care of the water, taking care of the land, so that it can take care of us in return, and we can continue that cycle.
I just say, be grateful. Remember to be grateful. We don't really celebrate, time the way other people do. Our time is judged by the Earth's cycles. We're just giving thanks right now for the harvest, to see that the Earth's doing another life cycle, and we're grateful to see this time of the year. Getting ready for the cold, and remember that 2/3 of the Earth's soil is depleted. Carbon emissions are at an all-time high. This is not getting better. By the day, it's getting worse. So it's happening now, and now's the time to do something about it.